Do you have sound coming out of yours?
Yeah, I should turn. Oh, is my mic not on? My mic is off, actually. We had this problem before.
Oh, I know what it is. Do you have? I have speakers on. You have speakers on, and
Okay, how's that?
I mean now.
Yeah.
How do I tell if anything's coming out of it? Well, we don't need.
You can
We
tell
don't.
that's
Yeah,
what
yeah, you're right. We don't need to hear anything. No.
And also, you can see the green light.
Yeah. But I just don't have anything coming out of my speakers. So if anyone else says anything, I won't be able to hear
Oh,
it.
okay, but it's only just the two of us on there so far.
Yes, we are. Oh, thank you.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's right. No one needs to sign.
See, Dave didn't tell me what I was supposed to do to prepare to host this, so we could put
Does anybody have a piece of tape?
Yeah, I can put it outside actually. Where have you been putting it in the hall?
It's just on the door.
Just
like,
on
just
the-
say the knock or something like that. Does anybody want to speak next month? Anybody really feeling it?
I think you should, because if you break that habit.
Well, I'm not saying we won't speak. I'm just saying, trying to get a volunteer out of this room.
Oh.
Dave's an expert in that.
But the last Wednesday in November.
Yeah.
Should we get started then?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
So yeah, actually, well, should we just look? Next month, that would be the 26th. So, and then December we would have a social anyway. So there's only going to be like one meeting with talks left this year. Did anybody have anything that they want something else to talk about? Like, did anybody want to have like Mike to talk about something?
That's how it works now. We don't do our own talks. We nominate other people for talks.
How about the version about the differences between the 516, 518, 513? Let's do that.
If someone knows the differences, it's probably worth it.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, you just have to read the deltas, which is not a small task. I mean, that might be interesting. Because personally, I'm not always clear on sort of what the differences are. Somebody, are you volunteering? Yeah. Okay.
You can just mention the salient points. It's important.
Let's give us a diff.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good. Well,
The entire code base.
Okay, and did you want to, how long do you want to talk for? Should we line up another speaker for that night as well then? I usually find 2 speakers on the night.
Yeah,
So
you don't want one to do the whole night. It sort of ends up being hard for the person.
okay, so that's
How actually there are people writing 512.
yeah, I mean, what are you guys using here?
Variety. You was using 16. Okay, 14 maybe. Well, okay, our servers are 512. Like the Solaris ones, like the system Pro is 512.
System Pro is 5.8.
Oh, 5.8, yeah, that's right. Oh, which a lot of stuff is running on still. And then we've done our own like sort of rolled version of Perl with whatever it's called. But we did our own version, and I'm pretty sure it's 514. I thought we were doing 516. Okay. I think we updated tools to be all 516. Maybe I never did. Maybe I just dreamt of it. It's possible.
okay, so I'm gonna mute your mic. Turn my mic on, and you need to turn your speakers off, I think. Okay, so they were on. So we know we have audio, right? Okay. Do we have audio actually? Yeah, okay, I can see the lights going. All right. I think that's about as much as you can go. You can maybe just, you could probably get rid of the, you want the group chat on, I think, on the side.
Yeah. This would be nice over here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can move those. There might be something in preferences. Yeah, you could hide that from broadcast. There you go.
Oh, you are?
Let me unmute myself. Okay.
Oh, that's why it keeps on popping. Well, luckily no one else has joined. So.
Yeah, well, it says 4 viewers. So.
Oh, we do.
Okay, well, you've had the slides up to this point anyway.
Okay.
All right, well, we're experts at this, that's true.
It seems to me that Google Hangouts UI is in serious need of attention.
Like a lot. Yeah.
Why on his did it show it in white, and then on mine was it in red? Whereas if you look at the top here, red means it's muted, and white means it's not muted. So why would I just assumed on his icon it meant he was talking?
Oh, okay, yeah, no, you need to see the green
You see the green
dots.
dots? Yeah, I haven't done this often. Okay, pay that much attention to it.
All right, well, we're only a few minutes in. So essentially, so I see the jobs advertised in the 80 to 120,000 range. I don't have all the required skills, so I'd be willing to take something in a lower salary range. Pass or fail?
Fail.
Fail.
Yeah.
Anyone think it's a pass? No. What's wrong with this?
You're negotiating salary before you even need, it's like the second or third inning.
Exactly.
The salary negotiation should happen at the very end.
Yeah.
You need to qualify yourself.
Confidence coming from the person.
Yeah.
And that too, yeah.
Sorry, what did you say? There's no confidence coming out of the person who's applying for the job. You want them to say, I'm worth 120K, not, hey, could you?
Well, on the other hand, if he actually sends me the resume and he doesn't have the required skills, I'm not going to even consider it, right? So
Maybe that's, yeah, like you were saying, after the interview.
yeah. So it's I can see why someone would do that, but it's not a good client test for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely not the first.
It doesn't scream confidence, right? And that's also the thing is like maybe you don't have all the skills, but come into the interview and like really impress me, right? Like just we don't even know if we really want you yet, but you're already basically telling us that it's a very tentative sort of a thing, It's
Exactly, and it also depends how strong the field is. It could be the field is somewhat weak, and maybe you're the strongest candidate. And the employer goes, well, we want these 8 skills, we want 5 of them, but everybody else has got 3 or less, so you're the strongest candidate.
And the other thing is, really, if they're hiring someone at 80 to 100K, they're not going to hire you anyways at a lower salary because they don't want someone with that lack of skills. And if they do, they have another request for hire out that has a junior person, and you might as well apply for that job if you think that's the one you're qualified.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, you may think you're going to save the employer money, but there is already budget for this job between 80 and 120, right? Like,
You're taking money off the table.
you are taking money out before you've even started, right? And the hiring manager probably isn't going to say, oh, here's a place we can save 20,000. You're just interested in getting the right person into the job, right? So, yes.
Hi. Sorry.
Oh, it's no problem.
There's no signs downstairs.
Sorry, you know what? I should have updated the meetup. We're so lost without Dave.
Yes.
Okay, so the evaluation. So basically, we've talked about these points. Don't sell yourself short. It's too early to start pitching salary. You want to be judged on your skill. Why did you throw all this money away? You don't even have the job. You've already given all this money away. So.
What do you do if one of the first questions is, how much do you want?
We'll get to that in a bit. Which is actually a very good question. Basically, I think the answer is I'm not comfortable with talking about salary right now. We can do that.
This is a good fit.
Yeah.
Because this is a business negotiation. You want to discuss money.
And you have to remember, it is a negotiation. They're selling themselves on you at the same time you're trying to sell yourself to them. So, like, I don't want to tell them about my salary if I end up not wanting the job at all anyways. There's no sense in me telling them anything. So I'd rather just wait till the end.
Sometimes I'll push you at first to get a number, and it's best to just give them a range. And that's the only thing you can do.
You can just say, well, I'm a senior developer with 25 years experience.
I can't say that.
Well, actually, no. That's a good strategy. Like, basically, you say, yeah, this you know my resume, you know how much experience I have. I expect something that's competitive. Is that what you're prepared to pay?
It's very. You're giving up a lot of ground by mentioning. As soon as you mention a number, then like, well, write that down and use that against you.
Yeah.
Leave it vague for now.
The only people I would tell a number to is if you're going through a recruiter. Tell the recruiters because they can sift through jobs based on salary range. So you got to tell them what you're looking for as a minimum. But if you're dealing directly with them,
And you know what, that's a different negotiation.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
totally different.
definitely.
And in fact, if you are going through a recruiter and you go to a job and the people there, the interviewers, ask you a salary range, you say
Don't get involved, keep your mouth shut.
you probably
Yeah.
are going to talk about this later.
Yeah, we definitely. That's farther in the process, but yeah, they're all actually very good points. But basically, don't show your cards right away.
Yep.
I mean, the only thing you might want to talk salary if you have a feeling like they have a ridiculously low upper limit on their salary. You just don't want to waste anybody's time. But that should be obvious from the outset, I think. Okay, so we've got another cover letter, and this was from this other one that Mark and I had seen. And my wife saw this job listing. She said, "Gerald, this sounds exactly like the sort of job for you." Now, what do you guys think of that? Pass or fail? Fail? I loved it. I loved
Yeah,
it.
this is fine. This is just about
This wasn't the entire cover letter, but this is how it started. As soon as I saw this, I'm like, I really like this guy. Like, I want to hear more from this guy right here.
Yeah, like one of the things about cover letters is, people that are, you're going through all these resumes and you have to read all these cover letters. If you write something in it that's going to jump out at the person, that helps. Like it gets their attention right away, and obviously you're not trying to make a joke like some weird joke or anything. But this is enough. This is to show the person has some personality. As long as the rest of the cover letter is professional, this is a good start.
Yes, I was taking it out of context.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think if you go without the context, you go either way. But it reminds me, like, I play in a band, and the band's called Vile Richard, and I sent out all these CDs to radio stations, and I sent some out to Britain. And I had this BBC in Scotland ended up picking up one of the songs and playing it, and I listened to the broadcast. And when he introduced the song, he said, "As soon as I opened the letter, I knew I was going to play this song." When I opened it, it said, "Hello, Vile Richard hopes this letter finds you well." So anyway, he was just like, "Oh, hey, this is great. I'm actually going to listen to this," just because he thought it was a kind of a quirky way to address it. I'm sure he gets a lot of people sending him stuff. So there's nothing wrong with just doing something that's going to grab someone's attention. And if you can make your personality come out, assuming you have a good personality, in your cover letter, then so much the better, right?
If you don't steal it from someone else.
Yeah, okay. So I thought whimsical, personal touch, nice lead in. Okay, another cover letter. I've been unemployed for 15 months. That's more of a factor of the current job climate than it is a reflection on my own skills. So pass or fail. Fail. And because
Not because of the
Yeah, but one of the problems I've been seeing is that I repeatedly am getting, I'm looking for a new job, but I'm employed. Over and over again, so you get past the first HR recruiter is, are you currently employed? Are you currently employed? Are you currently? And it's like, if you say no, as far as I can tell, it stops right there. They don't want people
You've
for
got
some
a big
reason.
black mark against you.
If you don't have a job already, it's kind of strange.
I guess you could tell them you're self-employed.
Yeah.
But that's what I would recommend. Tell them you're self-employed.
You're doing some freelance right now.
Freelance or contract work. And you decided you've been doing that for a while and you want to move on to a full-time position. It's a fairly regular transition people make, so they'll be expecting it.
You could be unemployed for a whole variety of reasons that shouldn't be held against you. Now, what do you think about putting that in your cover letter, though?
And you got the other thing.
I think it's important to say, if you've been unemployed or whatever you've been doing for 15 months, talk about what you have been doing during that.
Yeah.
That's
And should have a story to tell them about that too.
Right, but exactly. But this is the thing. Like, is this the first thing I want to know about you? Is that the most fascinating aspect of your life? No, it's like it's not. To an extent, it's not really that relevant. I just want to know if I want to read your resume. But right now, you're telling me, whoa.
And honestly, you don't need to mention it because you're going to be sending them the resume, which will have your employment in it, which is going to see, they're going to see what your last employment was. It's going to have ended 15 months ago. So
Yeah.
you don't need to re-emphasize the point either.
Another issue that we'll cover with resumes, though, is it's okay to have a gap in your resume. In fact, I was talking with him about this before. One of his bosses, he had a friend who was in prison. That is a gap in his resume, but you don't address that. It's just not. There's just nothing. There's no accounting for that time on your resume. If somebody wants to ask you about it, great, but don't raise a red flag and say, I want to talk about this. It's not helpful to you. Yeah.
It was a tough place.
Yeah. Code reviews were terrible. So basically, don't wave a red flag and say, hey, I'm not working right now. But and again, just don't talk yourself out of the job you don't get to have. Okay, so this one I figured I'll share a cover letter that I wrote with you, not because it's amazing, but because it's not a work of fiction, and I did actually get the job. And this is actually one that I'm particularly proud of, despite the spelling mistake that's in it. And I just went and looked this up yesterday, and I'll just read it to you. It says, "Hello, I just wanted to get in touch about the senior developer job posted last week. I'm quite familiar with MaxMind. Aside from having used GUIP, it's one of the products in a lot of my code. I've actually been a paying subscriber of yours since at least 2005. So I'm not just interested in the posting, but I'm also a fan of what you do. I'm active in the Perl community. I'm a founder and coder #1 in the Meta CPAN project. I'm one of the authors of the iOS iCPAN application, which puts CPAN docs on your iOS device. I've recently converted it from an iPhone app to a universal app. This past April, when I was at the QA hackathon in Paris, France, last month I spoke at YAPCNA in Madison, Wisconsin. My Perl modules can be found on Meta CPAN. My other code can be found in my GitHub account. This past week, I've been working on a Catalyst application, a Dancer application, fixed an obscure postfix error, and set up Munin to monitor the processes on a mail server. On an unrelated note, a couple of years ago, I set up some scripts to automate installing GUIP modules. If there's a better way of doing this, I'd love to hear about it. And then just included links to the little scripts that I'd written, and then set up, including my resume in line below. Get in touch if you have any questions. Pass, fail.
Awesome. Well, it worked.
Yeah, so that is currently where I'm working. What are the good parts about this cover letter?
I like how you end up by asking for advice on how to tackle your project a bit better, because that engages them.
Right, and it gives them a code sample to work with immediately as well. Anything else?
I mean, it's good that you showed like stuff you've been doing.
Yeah.
Like the Perl community talks. You mentioned a hackathon. You showed where all your open source is. So not only code samples, but it shows you the breadth of your what you've done in coding world.
Right. And then the other thing I thought was effective was just the fact that, like, when I saw this job posting, I was like, oh, I've been paying these guys for years. I wouldn't mind working here. I know exactly what they do. So, and I thought I would make that clear right from the outset that, I'm not just an outsider or whatever. I'm actually already sort of within your community. So I thought that was helpful. Never actually asked anybody for feedback on it. But
It worked though. So.
it did not count against me, I
Good.
guess. Okay, so resumes. This is now from the aspect of the employer. Let's talk about resumes a little bit. I saw a quote on Hacker News the other day that said every CV should be regarded as a work of fiction. I think as an employer, if you're looking at a resume, you should view it with a healthy degree of skepticism. So as a musician, I read other musicians' bios, and when you read a bio, it's always in the third person, but you know that the musician actually wrote it themselves, right? And actually, sort of an extension of that is when you read articles about these musicians, a lot of it is just a reprint of the bio in many cases. So the musician has, in fact, written his or her article to a degree in the newspaper. And a resume is sort of the same thing, where you're telling me all the great stuff about you. You're doing your best to hide the warts, and so I have to try and see through this. And as we alluded to earlier, gaps in your employment history are fine. Don't worry about it. And the reason for this is I don't want a 3 or 4 page resume. Like, I really don't, if I can avoid it. I read one recently for somebody who's only done contract work for the last 15 years, and it was like a list of all of his contracts. And like, you know what? Doesn't matter, right? I'm like, if I'm going to call anybody, I'm going to ask you for a reference. I'm not going to start calling these random companies. And it wasn't really that interesting.
You wanted a full-time job now after doing all this contract?
Yeah.
I want to raise a question here. People talk about full-time versus contract. I think there is a false dichotomy. Contract is about remuneration arrangement. There are some jobs that you can do part-time, but development isn't one of. You've got to concentrate 100% on whatever you're doing at the time. So, yes, I want to be busy full-time, but I'm pretty sure, based on experience, that you will have times when you have nothing for me to do. I would rather be somewhere else than sitting in the office pretending to work.
Yeah.
Which is what 90% of people seem to do, at least employees.
Yeah.
It seems to be pervasive though in industry that there's even sections of a company like a contractor pit. Well, they'll just put the contractor. That's where you guys go when full-time guys just get to enjoy it.
Yeah, but it's not just remuneration, right? It's also the employment laws don't apply to you.
That's right.
They can get rid of you like for no reason, whenever. So it's not just that. And my experience has been they hire contractors because they know what they're doing. Like they need a pool of people who are specialists and know what they're doing and do a lot of the work that others can't or won't do it.
I think boys just sit around and talk about.
Though I've seen the reverse of that as well.
Yeah, the reverse happens too.
I wonder if one of the reasons you sometimes see long CVs, it used to be, at least when I was younger, a CV for company day was everything.
Yeah.
And your resume was your summary. Like my father has a resume which is 2 pages long. He has a CV which is 40 pages long. You know, an artist that I've done work for, in the arts community, you're expected to provide a CV, which is everything you've ever done right back to your training. Yours is like 45 pages long, because she's in their 70s. And I'm wondering if part of that is people are throwing around CVs and stuff now, but that's not what it is. It's a resume.
Well, and there's a cultural thing too. Like if you get a CD from Germany, it might actually have the person's photo on it.
Yes.
Like kind of stuff that we think is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's a European thing. I know I applied for a job in Germany, and they asked me for a program.
They might even want your age as well, right? So,
These days, is that so unreasonable with things like LinkedIn and sharing your projects and so on?
no, I don't. I just think it's just different. I don't think that's necessarily unreasonable.
I don't think that's.
But
age is unreasonable asking. Your
Yeah,
age, yes.
I mean, I don't think your employer should have to request it from you. I mean, if you volunteer that.
Not necessarily if they want a picture, my LinkedIn profile is on my resume. They can go look at me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So they can look it up themselves.
Okay, so the gaps are fine. Just put the interesting things on it that you've done, and when you say where you've worked, tell a little bit about what you've done there. Maybe the interesting things that you did. If you saved the company $200,000 or something, you could put that in there. I've seen people say, I instituted this program and it generated this much revenue and stuff. I mean, sometimes those things are helpful to know. So stress the things that you're good at, and you might also just say what problems there are that you're interested in solving. Like, I don't know about NoSQL data stores or whatever. But these are things that I'm looking into my spare time. I'd love to work somewhere where I can learn more about these kinds of things. As someone who's reading these things, I'm actually interested in a lot of times in what you don't know, but what you'd like to know more about.
Do you have a resume to show us?
Actually, I don't have a resume. But just because I actually didn't want to dwell too much on the resume, I thought Uri was actually going to talk about this. So from the applicant perspective, HR, somebody in HR might want to read it, so you might want to include the things that you think they want to see. If you're submitting this to some kind of a website, there may be a scanner that it goes through to check off that a certain number of buzzwords are in there, gets filed in the appropriate place. Of course, your resume will also end up in the hands of your peers because they will be interviewing at some point, so you want to keep that in mind.
I read somewhere today they even use the data mining, like the robots. Software is looking for some passwords. If they don't find, they just send them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting thousands of applications, you don't want to pay someone to weed through them. I mean, those are definitely things to consider. If you're applying for a software position, but you're also a bit of a maker, you can include a blurb about that. I read a really great resume from a guy in Germany, and he had also it was a first software position, but he also had used an Arduino set up to water his lawn. And he had a video of how he showed it all and he demonstrated it. Stuff like that I think is super interesting, and I think that there's stuff that you can do that's interesting outside of this. I mean, if you're a world champion at something, if you you got a Guinness World Record at something, I want to know about it. I've got a friend who has a Guinness World Record for driving north to south across Canada or something like that. Stuff like that makes you an interesting person. I want to know about, because I mean when you're hiring someone, you want a good developer, but you want B, someone that you don't mind sitting beside 8 hours for a day, right? So social fit's really important. I think people don't always realize that. As part of this, I wish employers would do a better job about putting employees at ease, or applicants at ease in interview settings as well. Because again, do I want to be working with you? So and again, to just go back to this band analogy, if you're going to go on tour, you're going to be in a van with this person for 1, 2, or 3 weeks or even longer. Is this someone you can stand for that long, right? Like I have a friend, let's say I have a friend, he's a really great drummer, but I don't really want to be in the same room with him for a week, right? I will take someone who's not as good of a drummer, but who's really likes to carry the equipment and do all this other stuff, right? But it really is true because for that kind of thing, setting, you're playing for like 1 or 3 hours a night. The rest of the time you're just with other people, right? So the actual performance is one aspect of it, but being able to get along as a group, and if there's friction with people that you're going to be with all the time, like it's a real problem. It's the same way in a company. Like you don't want to start bringing people into the company there to start introducing like new stress. There's already enough stress around. So a social fit's really important.
Actually, Inc.com has been doing a lot of talk about hiring recently, and that's one thing that they've actually been saying that they think that employers should devalue things like tests and stuff during interviews because the fit is more important. Quite frankly, they were saying that your skills. If they can, if you can show you can learn, then whatever your current skill point is, doesn't matter if you're fit. If you fit the team right, your skill point will go up to the point that you're needed. If you don't fit, it doesn't matter how much skill you have coming in, you're not going to help the team.
Yeah,
I'm sure. That I just went through one where it's like test after test after test.
Yeah, like I've actually had a few interviews like that,
And it's just
where they do fit interviews first. They don't even bother asking you anything technical. They just talk to you about culture and what you're looking for and stuff like that before you even get on to any testing. So I think some employers at least are taking this to heart, starting to.
This one went through like 6 hours of testing after testing after testing different people.
Question for you. Did you have anything to say about the type of organization, like very large organizations versus smaller? Is this process different in your experience?
Like I can't comment on that too much because I've always worked for very small companies. So some of that say what Alan's talking about with people not doing anything, that I don't really have an experience with that because there's always been way more work than people. So I mean that might be something that we could discuss at the end of this, or even as a topic of another talk. But yeah, there definitely are different cultural differences if you're going to be in a big company. One thing too, I think, is if when you're in this whole process and you're interviewing the company, you should find out like what the actual development practices are like. For example, I want to work with smart people that I can learn from, but if it's not an atmosphere that's conducive to me learning from other people, like if everyone's got their head down, they don't want to take time from their job to help me with my job, then it's not really a place that I'm interested in working in. So those are the things that you can try and find out ahead of time.
You can look at places like Glassdoor, the bigger organisations, and see whether they're up or out company or whether they actually enjoy being there.
Yeah.
Because like I've worked for Accenture, which is truly awful. Just because the whole thing is you suck in millions of graduates and you expect a certain amount of attrition and people that will stay at the very long top. Small companies generally have a better chance of knowing someone there, particularly if you're local in the area. You might have them in that you can take the temperature of the company unofficially.
Yeah. And that's a good idea, and we'll talk about that in a bit too. Now, so once you've got the resume and the cover letter out of the way, if you made it this far, then you're probably looking at the phone screen. And again, this will, from my experience, be a lot about. So it seems to me like the HR person's main duty is to find out, like, is this person a serial killer? Like, is there like some blocker? There's some deal breaker involved here. Like, are you a total weirdo? Right? So we'll get that out of the way first, and then a phone call should at least see, can this person have a normal conversation? Are they completely awkward? Would they be able to look me in the eyes? This kind of thing. And that's also then a chance to sell you on the job, and then clarify the things in the job ad that really didn't make any sense. If you do those Google phone screens, I think they're about an hour, like the initial one, and it'll be like half an hour of just talking to you about how great it is to work there. And then, but then after that, there will be a bit of a technical screen where they'll have you rate yourself on 1 to 10 on these various questions. Where 1 is you've never heard of the language, and 10 is you're one of the designers of the language. That kind of thing. So there might be some of that aspect to the phone screen. And if you're worried about whether or not there will be these questions, you can always just find out ahead of time. Now, from the applicant's perspective, don't come off as a serial killer, right? That should be your first thing. Like, don't be a weirdo. There's nothing wrong with being a weirdo, but I'm just saying, as far as a good social fit goes, just
try to relax. It's just a conversation, and just try and get some information out of this person. If you have any deal breakers, that might be a good time to get them out of the way. If you're worried about being on pager duty. There's one company that I had been talking to, and they said, we want you to fly down quarterly, but we won't pay you per diem. Like, just weird stuff like that. That might come out in the phone screen. It might not. You might want to find out how many hours a week the developers are working, like what sort of timelines. Like, if you've got a young family, you want to be home. These are things that you want to know about, right? And then I do like to find out right off the top if there's time off for conferences, if they have a training budget, that kind of thing. Because if you do plan on going for conferences, and if you have to take that time out of your vacation time, that can be a big problem.
And that's something that would actually benefit the company, so you would think.
You would think.
Yeah.
There's another one that I discovered recently. I started working for a company, and in your first year of employment, you're not allowed to take vacation you have not yet earned, so you
That's really common, actually.
Yeah.
First year.
Yeah.
Really? This is the first time I've come
Yeah, you have to
across
keep
it.
accumulating.
Prorated vacation.
And
It's
I just thought,
terrible.
I mean, it wasn't like I wanted to take 2 weeks off in
Yeah.
the first and the second month. It was like I probably wanted to use 1 day.
They wouldn't even prorate your vacation for like 1 day a month kind of thing.
Well, it's 3 weeks, so I guess it's a 1.
You can take 6 hours off.
Yeah, so I just thought, that's kind of.
I'll need you by 3.
I want to have a single 1 day deficit for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, are they gonna lose money if you quit the next day? It's like it's crazy.
Just gave me less holiday vacation.
Yeah. More questions you can ask about the development process. But I mean, these are real things. Like, there are some companies that have just recently switched from CVS.
Or is it that one famous advertisement? You have to hate software maintenance. Whatever the category is, the source code maintenance packages.
Yeah. And now, the other thing is, when you're being asked questions, and this holds true for the interview as well, if you don't know the answer to a question, just say that you don't know. And here's the thing. If I'm trying to find out what you know, maybe I'll ask a whole bunch of different questions just to sort of get an idea of what you do and don't know. So the fact that you don't know something just tells me that you don't know it. It doesn't tell me that you're bad at what you do. We all have like wildly varying skill sets. So that's really what the purpose of this is. I find I like to guess, but I will actually tell them, this is my guess, this is my reasoning, is this the right answer? That for me is kind of a fun game to play. But the worst thing you could possibly do is just say, is act like you know the answer. I talked to a recruiter, and he was saying he sent a guy to an interview. The guy came out and said, oh, I aced the whole thing. Then when he talked to the company, he said he was terrible. He got all the answers wrong, kind of thing. So, and it was just that's where you're going with all this confidence without actually really knowing the answers. You're never going to get that job.
The question I was interviewing for a testing job a while back, and one of the people they ended up putting in for some reason was the head of development. And the first thing he did was whiteboard out how you write this application. Tester. I don't write code, or I don't design apps. I'm not very good at it. I haven't done it in years. Give me some pseudocode, and I can tell you how to go through and ask you questions about testing it. But he kept on coming back to, I want you to give this problem, design a solution. And how do you, if someone keeps on wanting that, and you told them, I don't know how to do this,
So,
and they keep coming back to it.
I don't know, you do basically what Olaf said, like, you don't see you're guessing, you say, well, I've
But that's what I said, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not a developer, I can take a guess at
Yeah,
this, I
that's
can
what
try it, but I really prefer, I can talk about testing it, but the person kept on coming back, and he wanted me to develop something.
So you basically have to do what they ask you to do.
Yeah.
You can't like refuse to answer a question.
But we'll actually, whiteboarding is a few slides down, and we'll get actually into that situation.
I was just wondering how to get it, because it was something I didn't feel comfortable with. I worked my way through it, but it was still very...
Yeah, so there is a solution to that.
So Google is actually very into doing that. That's like their official policy internally, is like find something the person doesn't know and really drill them on that. And their goal is to find out what your creative thought process is when you don't know the answer. If you know the answers to the questions, they're not interested in those bits of the interview. They're interested in when you get stuck, what you do then.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. So now on a really banal point, what to wear to the interview? And I've heard various answers to this, and some people may just want to put on a suit or whatever, but really if you're unsure, just ask. Like, what's the dress? What do people normally wear to the office? Find out what that is.
Yeah.
Maybe wear something in the upper range of that. You don't want to walk in with shorts and flip-flops necessarily, even if that's what everyone else is wearing. Put a collar on your shirt.
But one of the things you should do is you should be wearing something that you would wear to the job. Even if it is the higher range of what you wear to the job, wear something you would actually wear there. And if it's something you're not comfortable wearing there, like if it's a suit, you probably don't want to be applying for that job anyways.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be the right environment for you.
Yeah, and also you want to be comfortable in the interview. And if you never wear your suit, you are not going to be guaranteed comfortable in this interview. You'll sweat like a pig in this jacket that's a bit too tight around the arms and all this kind of thing. I spoke with an HR person at one company, and she was telling me that they always laugh about this guy with the wrinkly suit. Nobody remembers what his name is, but I guess he had flown in, overnight from another country, may have just had his carry-on or even his computer bag, stuffed his suit into it, put the suit on in the morning, wore it to the interview, and just looked terrible. But he was wearing a suit, right? I mean, that's... And they were just like, don't wear a suit. Like, all they remember of this guy is how bad he looked. So,
Remember that guy we interviewed at Rayback? With a tie that was about this wide.
Yeah.
And this shirt that was barely tucked in, and I forget.
He had a scarf that was like 10 feet long.
Yeah, it was just a weird outfit.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, he likes that as a weird thing, but it's still. You could tell that's not what he wears all the time. Like, he didn't look comfortable in it or anything. It's just he thought, I need to wear a tie to an interview, so this is the tie I have. I'm going to wear it.
Yeah.
This is the button up shirt I have, so I'm going to wear it. You got to wear something you're comfortable in and make yourself look presentable.
Yeah, and this goes to the social fit as well, I think. So.
And also on that guy, he also took a phone call in the middle of the interview, so that was a big.
That's a big no.
It wasn't even important.
Here. Like, I had some interesting ones here. There was one guy who showed like 15 minutes late to the interview. And when he came back for the second round interview, he was like 20 minutes late. And there was one other guy, I don't know. He came in, he must not have showered that morning. It was just like,
you told me about this.
Smell.
Yeah.
To the extent that like people started making excuses about projects they had to run off the news, like just to get out of the room. Which, yeah, that wouldn't work out so well.
Yeah, that's
That's a legitimate problem. You can suppress a bad temper to a certain extent. You can't avoid the bad smell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think Matt had told me about this interview, and that sort of stuck with me. And it really is like one of those things where you could be a great person, but if you don't smell great, those sorts of things can be distracting to other people. It's just the way it is. It's nothing against anybody personally, but just take a shower, whatever. If you take a shower, don't put on a dirty shirt that you sweated in the day before, right? Like in the mornings when you're in the subway, like you're just wondering, how long are these shifts people are working, right? It just smells terrible.
If for some reason you actually have some sort of condition, you should mention it. Say I recognize that I may not have the best odor. It's a condition that I'm working on.
I will need my own office. Yeah.
Summarize it. Be self-aware.
Yeah, if you're not sure if you smell, ask someone. So, and again, I was thinking about this interview that Mark and I did where the guy took the phone call, and it was maybe his wife asked him to bring milk home or something like that. It wasn't it was absolutely not, and he was just like, I don't even know if he asked if he could take it. Just took this call.
Picked it up. And at the end, he said, "Oh, it was my wife. I had to answer that." But then he said there was something about picking something up on the way home. He actually told us what it was about. At least make something up and say it was an emergency and you were waiting for this phone call or something.
Yeah, the ambulance.
Make something up about it.
So, and another guy that Mark and I interviewed was a guy who had his laptop open the entire time. He just sat there with his open laptop talking to us, it was almost like he was waiting for a better offer to come in. It's just.
And the thing is also from body language point of view, that's a barrier between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it was just weird. Okay, so now. And we've talked about this. So basically, this is your chance to find out a lot of information about this company. And it's not just because you want to get paid. It's because you're going to spend really the bulk of your waking hours in this place with these people. So, do your research. And again, are you a good social fit for them? Are they a good social fit for you? Like, these are the kinds of things that, there's a lot of places you can work where they're going to be solving interesting problems, but, they're not all equal as far as what it's like to actually be
One of
there.
the things I like to ask is the developers if they like working there and what they like about working there specifically. That's a good question. It makes them open up, and you can tell right away if they seem excited. They're all going to tell you there's something they like, because otherwise, they're not selling the business. But you can usually get a good read on them, whether it's actually true or not. You can tell if they're engaged, and that helps a lot, for social fit.
Yeah. I've asked that too, and I've also asked what they don't like,
Yeah.
which they're a little more guarded with.
That's also a value.
No, I was going to say that was the next thing. Like, I was asked about
I hate CVS.
They say they like CVS,
Yeah.
you should
Whoa,
leave.
Rod,
Yeah.
Watch for the pained silences.
Yeah. You might also want to play some mind games. You might just at least want to plant the seed in these people that you're the kind of person who likes to do certain things. Ask, like, can I get time off to go for a conference? When I go to conferences, I like to speak. And they think, oh, this guy speaks at conferences, so that's interesting. Must know what he's talking about. They don't know what you talked about, but at least to put it out there, maybe these are the people that will be helping to make your hiring decisions. They may not have read your resume thoroughly, so just if there's stuff like that,
if they interview you, they'll be told their opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So just get those things across. Okay, now whiteboarding. I'm going to say that whiteboarding is for a lot of companies a necessary evil. I think probably, and hands up, who enjoy whiteboarding? 2 in an interview? Yeah, 3 people.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
good stuff, man.
Okay.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, I totally respect that. You are not in the majority, so.
I don't mind doing the coding stuff. I just don't like doing it on a whiteboard.
Well, yeah, this is part of the problem too.
I've done a bunch where they actually give you a computer and then you can do
Yeah, or pad and paper.
Or pad and
I want to discuss that later.
I don't know.
The concern with the computer one is that I'm always worried they're going to try compiling them and running it, and it's like there are syntax errors because you're not like moving it.
I don't care about that. I think syntax errors doesn't bother me. I tell them to write it in pseudocode anyways.
So basically, I read a blog post recently where somebody said whiteboarding shows us how people react under stress, which I thought was a pretty terrible way of describing why you want someone to whiteboard. I don't really care how somebody reacts under stress, really, because I'm going to say most of the time you're not going to be under that much stress, hopefully, at your job. There will be times where there's pressure, but there will not be many times in your job where you'll be asked to walk to the front of the room, write something on the board, and everybody will critique you on you as you do it, right? Like it's a very sort of an artificial construct. But what it does is it allows other people to watch how you troubleshoot something. We can hear you talk through a problem. We can see how you get from A to B. And then once you do that, we can discuss, either what you did wrong or other ways you could have done it, because there's always more than one way to do it. So it gives you a framework for a conversation. And I think if you look at it that way, it's not as bad as you might think. But because it is this construct that most people aren't familiar with, it does set some people up for failure. So none of us whiteboard professionally, I think, right? There are some people that have performance anxiety, like when my wife's standing behind me, I can't even type for some reason. Like, it just freaks me out. Like, it's just like, some people stumble. Some people, when they're speaking publicly, can't get the words out of their mouth. We know they know how to talk. They do it all the time, right? But,
That's my problem. I can't do it when someone's just standing there waiting for you to.
Yeah, it's the same thing with music too. Like, if you're playing an instrument or if you sing or something, the first time you do it in front of a crowd, you take your breath away a little bit. It can be, but once you've done it a whole bunch of times, it's really not so bad. One tip for employers, though, is that you don't actually have to shoulder surf people. If you're actually just interested in the solution, then you can go do something else. I had this one interview where they said, you know what, we're all going to have a conversation at the other side of the room, and you can let us know when you're done. And I thought that was great, and I just wrote my answer up, and then we talked about it. So that's one thing I did appreciate about that company there, is that they were mellow enough to do that. Okay, so the reality of this is, some of us complain about whiteboards and we say, well, I'm not good at whiteboarding, so if I fail the interview based on this, they're losing out on a good candidate, but they don't know it. So probably some people would tell you that's okay, because we're using whiteboarding to weed out the bad applicants. We're okay with weeding out some of the good applicants as well, if it means that we don't get somebody who's bad at what they do, right? Because it is very hard to judge people on their skills based on just a conversation. Probably the best thing a company could do is just give you a 2 or 3 day contract or even a 2-week contract, see how you work out, and then evaluate you based on that. But the whiteboard sort of quickly gets you from A to B and gives you some sense of that. Now, I would say that whiteboarding is a skill and that skills can be acquired. So if you're not comfortable with whiteboarding, you just have to start doing it. If you're worried that there will be whiteboarding and you want to prepare, just ask about it before the interview. It might gonna have to produce some code. So how do you actually become better at whiteboarding? So try to practice on a real whiteboard. See, the problem for me is I type all the time. I rarely write with something. If you give me a big fat marker and tell me to stand in front of this board and write vertically instead of horizontally, then for me it's a problem. So if you have access to a whiteboard, use it. If you could practice in front of others, that's good too. If you're at work, just ask one or two of your peers to sit behind you and start throwing questions at you, and just go through the whole whiteboarding thing. They can heckle you if that makes you feel better. But really, actually get that feeling of doing this. Again, just to go back to the music analogy, if you're worried about playing in a room, it's nice to get into that room ahead of time and do your sound check. And you know where your amps are and everything is. You got everything worked out. So the only variable is now doing it with people in the room. So you can try that with the whiteboard as well. If you don't have a whiteboard, which probably a lot of people don't have at home, just take a pad of paper and a pen. I had one interview where I did a really terrible job on the whiteboard. The following interview that I had, I flew out to the interview, and on the plane I took a pad and paper and I just started thinking up problems for myself and trying to do them. The night before I went out and I got a burger at a restaurant, and then I just sat with my pad and paper and did some more problem solving. And then and I really focused on legible handwriting, because at the interview before I had gone quickly and I was nervous and I wrote a bunch of stuff that in the end I couldn't read. So, and I'm just sitting there, I was getting all flustered, I couldn't read it, I had, it was a real mess for me. And in the end it totally threw me off. But if you actually really could just focus on writing something that's readable and just a couple good variable names, that'll get you a long way. And in fact, what happened at the next interview was that I was actually complimented on my handwriting. And it was so much easier for me. And just take it slowly. Now, one thing you might want to do is clarify in advance: is this a problem we're going to talk through ourselves, or is this a problem you want me to solve? You don't want them to come back to you and say, "Oh, you needed too much help with your whiteboarding problem." I've had that kind of feedback before as well. So yeah, get the legible handwriting, write slowly, choose memorable variable names, and then don't be afraid to erase stuff in the backtrack. You're going to do that when you're writing code anyway. If you find you've taken up too much space with your subroutine or whatever, just erase stuff or do whatever you need to do. I mean, there's a set amount of time for the interview, but probably they don't care about going through all the questions. It's just about the process. So if you take a few extra minutes on the whiteboard to get your point across, that's not a problem. So did that answer your question about the whiteboarding?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, I think if you accept that it's outside of your control, that it will happen, and that you just do the best that you can to not make the whiteboarding a liability, then that.
So the whiteboarding, I whiteboard test plan.
Yeah.
It's just a
problem
questions,
right? The guy doesn't want you to write.
Yeah, and again, but I think that's a good.
I think part of the problem was that he was a development manager,
yeah,
and testing was outside of his comfort zone. And I kept on, give me a problem, and I can work my way through, the pseudocode of how I will test it.
Yeah.
I'll ask you questions about what your edges are, what your boundaries are, what your risks are, what your key factors are, and then I can walk through that. But he kept on, no, here's the problem. Tell me how you write the code to solve it.
Well, I think that's okay though, because
so that's what I kept doing. That's what I tried to try a bit. I really high level pseudocode.
Yeah.
And I talked with the fact that given this, I would always start testing this, and then I started asking a bunch of questions. And did it that way, but it kept on coming back to it.
Yeah. No, that's good though, because it shows if you're willing to tackle another problem, and it shows how you can get from A to B with that. I had a pair programming interview once for a back-end developer position. When I got there, they paired me up with a front-end developer. And I just said, look, this isn't what I do, but I'd love to see what you do, right. So let's sit down and work through some problems together. And I mean, we found some common ground that we could work on, but yeah.
And I do have to work. One of the things was I was saying about my handwriting.
Right.
And you try. I got my partway through it, and I looked at it. And then immediately I got nervous.
Yeah.
I think those circumstances, I thought that should be justified in saying that you seem to be interviewing for something other than the job for which I've applied.
You might think that, but you shouldn't say that in the interview. Because you're basically saying, I don't want this job.
Yeah.
You say that, which may be true, but there's no reason to sabotage your interview process at that point. You just do what they say.
Yeah.
You may get it, you may not, but you just do the best you can.
In the DevOps world, I think part of it is I'm going to be dealing with developers, so I'm probably going to be dealing with this guy, so I need to be able to talk to him, even if all he knows is development problem spaces. I need to go to figure out how to be able to talk testing problem spaces to this person.
Well,
so it's part of that, I guess. So.
Another thing is too, like if I'm hiring you for something, I'd like to know that you're not going to say no if something's specifically outside your domain. If something needs to be done, I would love to work with someone who says, I don't know how to do it, but I'll try my best, or I'll try to learn this, like that kind of thing. So if you show that sort of an attitude, I think that's helpful.
Okay. But this is useful. Sometimes.
Okay, so you've made it through the interview process. Now you've done your whiteboarding. You did an amazing job, and you wowed everyone. And now it's time for you to sit down and do the negotiation. Okay? Now, we're not professional hockey players. We don't have somebody who goes to the table for us. We have to do these things ourselves. Now, negotiating is a skill. You're a skilled tech person, but you're probably not a skilled negotiator. And because skill is acquired with practice, how many times have you had to negotiate a salary in the last year? Anyone have to do it more than once? No. Now, the person that you're negotiating with, how many times have they negotiated salary in the past year? Many, many times, probably. So who's got the upper hand here? It's not you, right? So that's. I think you need to go into it with this mindset that, there's the one thing to understand is that on some level everything is negotiable. It's not always the case, but I worked with this guy and I learned a lot from him. He was a business partner, and he basically told me that at the place he worked, he negotiated the hydro bill. Like, he just called up the electrical company and got a better deal. I was like, how can you even get a deal from a utility? But that's what he did. Like, I've got a friend, whenever he shops retail, he says, before he makes a purchase, he says, oh, is this the best you could do? And sometimes the salesperson will say, oh, well, I'll knock off the tax and be like, great. But most people don't ask. And if you do not ask, you will not get. So one really powerful lesson I learned was when I was in university, I was applying for grad school, and I had applications in at a few different places, and I did have some offers in. And the head of the department at the school I was at, he came and he said, so, what do your offers look like? And I said, well, I've got my offer here, and then I've got an offer at Queen's as well. He said, well, what's Queen's offering you? And so I told him. And I think he knew what they had already offered me, and he said, oh, okay. And he said, well, why don't you go to the head of grad studies in our department and see if he can make you a better offer. Just see if he can give you some more money. Tell him that I sent you. So I walked into this other professor's office, and I said, well, this professor sent me, and he's wanted me to ask you for more money. And he laughed at me. But as he laughed, he said, he's like, the best I can do is an extra $1,000. And I was like, perfect, I'll take it. So, and he said, okay, well, I'll have them redraft you another letter, and we'll do that. And I walked out, and I was like, that is the easiest $1,000 I've ever made. He thought it was nothing, but I'm like, that was like less than 5 minutes of my time. I walked in, I asked for it, I got it, right? So why would you not ask, right?
Well, like an employment lawyer, executives.
Yeah.
Well, he actually has an employment lawyer will negotiate with the lawyer on the other side. But for some reason, when you're an employee, people don't seem to like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how common that is, but what I would say is that it's a good idea to at least have a lawyer look over the contract before you sign it, because that's been vetted by lawyers on the company side. There's no reason that it shouldn't be vetted on your side as well. There's a lawyer in my family that I passed my last contract to look over it, and he even said, he looked over a lot of contracts. He said, oh, I think you could do better on the vacation. Why don't you push for that, or these other sorts of things that he was able to point out to me. So even just from getting feedback, and sometimes there are those clauses in the contract that say everything you do belongs to the company, even if it's on your own time or stuff like that. So some of those clauses you may be able to get the company to strike them, so those things are negotiable as well. But just keep in mind that it's about more than money. There's tons of stuff that's negotiable, but most of us are focused on money, which is okay. because we're actually at the job to be paid. So now you should prepare for your negotiation. I remember one job that I went into, and they said, well, how much do you want? And I said, well, I don't know. What's the going rate? And I honestly did not know what the going rate was. And then the guy said, oh, well, don't worry. We looked it up for you. And he gave me all these printouts of different jobs that were sort of local to the area. But it was like some of them were in salary ranges, some of them were in dollar per hour ranges, and I kind of quickly looked at it, and I didn't really understand what the range was I should even be shooting for, right? And it was you're passing up a real opportunity to get yourself to the right salary if you don't do your research. So find out what's the going rate for this job, like a person of your experience in general, maybe in this country or in this city, and even at this particular company. So a salary in Toronto downtown, you could probably expect it to pay more than a salary in Oakville or out near the airport. I mean, it's not necessarily always going to hold true, but you know, if you're required to live in an urban setting and you have other costs, you know, you should expect to be paid appropriately for where you're going to live. Like, you know, if you're going to be in like San Francisco or New York City, those jobs will many times pay much more than the jobs in Wisconsin or whatever. So those are things you should keep in mind. And as Mike was saying, there's Glassdoor, there's Payscale.com. You can look at the salaries being posted on jobs.pearl.org as well. You know, you might also want to keep in mind that even when a salary range is posted with a job, there may be some flex in that as well. So don't always think that that's necessarily the upper barrier. But the best thing you can do is just ask other people. So now it's a little bit crass to walk up and say, Bobby, show me your last pay stub, right? Like, but you know, you can do this in a roundabout way. You can talk to other developers and say, what would the salary range be for someone with my experience, you know, at your company or in your city or whatever. I did this with a couple of developers when I was looking for a job, and both of them just came out and said, this is what I make. And to me, like, that was the most helpful thing, because then I actually had a real number to work with, and it wasn't just this kind of a hazy thing. You know, there's a lot of people that aren't posting their salaries on Glassdoor, so you're just sort of getting some subset of working people, and Glassdoor is also for a number of people that maybe have some kind of a grudge. So you need to keep those things in mind. But basically the best thing you could do is just try and network with other people and find out, you know, none of us have our salaries on our LinkedIn profiles, right? Partly because we don't want our coworkers to know how much we make, maybe, like, at least not in the open. I mean, the problem with the way things are generally set up is that, you know, it's easier for the employer to manipulate the amount of the salary if nobody else knows what everyone else is making, right? You can turn that around to your advantage as well, but you can basically play it that, I mean, that also means they're free to pay you more money, and nobody else will find out about it, right? So you need to keep that in mind too. But basically, knowledge is power. You guys read like the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey? When he's away for like 20 years, and when he comes back, he sees his family, but he actually comes back in a disguise, and he does not tell, I think it's even his father initially, who he is. He just plays this part of a stranger. And you know, one of the theories of why he does this is because knowledge is power, and you don't give away power if that's all you have. I read an article once about some people in say countries like I think it was the example was say in Greece or in India. You have smaller villages where people don't have as much money, and so knowledge is a currency, and so they'll lie to each other because that you barter with truth, right? So I found too, like, it was like weird when I was in Greece. I would be like, ask the guy at the hotel, could you turn the heat on in my room? And he'd be like, yeah, no problem. And he wouldn't turn it on. And I would come back and he would say, yeah, I'm just about to turn it on. But he would never do it. You know, and then I went to go get my glasses fixed, and I went to the shop, and I was like, can you fix my glasses? And they said, no, but we could sell you a new pair. Nothing we can do. Your glasses can't be fixed. So I went across the street to a jeweler, and he's like, yeah, just go down there, buy yourself some glue, come back. And he fixed my glasses in like 5 minutes. But it was like this thing where you're not going to get the truth from people necessarily, but it's nothing personal, but there's a cultural aspect to whether or not you want to tell people the truth, right? And this is the same kind of thing. Like, the company holds a lot of power over you because they know everything about how much everyone's making. The only thing they don't know is how much you're making, right? So if you give them that last piece of information right away, then like the balance of power shifted completely over to them. So that's something to keep in mind. So now, you can negotiate money, but there's tons of other things you can negotiate. So there's your annual salary, there's stock options. Some people might argue those are worthless in a lot of cases. You really don't know, especially if there's been no offering. There's also an annual bonus, and those can be performance-based, say your performance, the company's performance, some combination of those. You can ask for a signing bonus, which sometimes people don't do, but the signing bonus is, I have a friend, and he'd worked at a place as a contractor for a long time, and they said, look, let's make it official. And he said, okay, great, I want a signing bonus. And they kind of laughed, they're like, you're already here, but they gave him one anyway, because he asked for it, right? So
there's a good reason for a signing bonus, too, because a lot of the time when you're leaving a job, you're going to miss out on your yearly bonus. The signing bonus is to make up for the bonus you're losing. So there's a really good reason to do it.
He's a contractor, he was never in the bonus pool to begin with. So that's basically a way of saying, well, I should have got a bonus.
Yeah. There's also money for relocation. Just keep in mind with the relocation fee, you get the money to relocate there. You don't get the money to relocate back. Right?
Yes.
So that's a.
Another thing you can negotiate is vacation is something you can try and negotiate too.
Yeah.
Another source for technical salary info often is look for a professional engineering organization for like a state or a region, or a province or a country. Because most of them do annual salary surveys now.
Okay.
But it's for a technical training position, and it gives you junior, intermediate ranges right up through all of the engineering fields. And often those are freely available.
Okay.
Actually, there are websites with salary ranges for all kinds of jobs on there.
Could you plug me in? Okay, so those are good things. There's also a salary review cycle. So there might be say a set cycle with HR that they want to do a review with you once a year. But if you're not quite happy with the salary they're offering up front, just say you want to do this. Can we revisit my salary again in 6 months? And they may be quite happy to do that.
For bigger companies, maybe the salary is so tight that you are not going to negotiate anything, or it's more to negotiate small.
I would say any company you can negotiate yourself. Big ones especially, actually they have a huge range for their salaries usually. Smaller companies usually have less money, and they actually have less range. They have, this is how much money we can offer someone, but big companies have so many people in so many different bands of salaries that they can move you to the next band if they need to. They have a lot to do. Right.
Sometimes they're a bigger company. You can also, it sounds like it's not a salary negotiation. You can negotiate your title. Is that can actually,
that is
or you sort of say, look, no, I want to be a senior developer, or I want to be a senior developer manager. That all of a sudden puts you into a set of bands that can't affect the salary that you can negotiate with.
And there's like some companies in the financial industry where 70% of people that work there are VPs of something. Right? And that's just more of a salary designation than anything else.
There is one thing when we worked for a consulting company where we would try and lowball people on the way and get them to do a lateral when they came in. If people push for a higher rate, a jump, we give it to them, then we just make sure that over the next 2 years they end up where we wanted to be. The employers are just as savvy.
Yeah. But you might as well try and get what you can to start with.
Yeah, get the best up front, yeah. So as Mark was saying, so there's relocation assistance. As Mark was saying, there are vacation days and sick days. Now, if you're actually working for a company in the States, they might actually bundle those two together and just call them paid time off. So that would not be unusual. So if you have 3 or 4 weeks of paid time off and you are sick for 3 or 4 weeks, that is it. You don't have any vacation. So that's it. They don't really care how you spend it. You've been paid. So those are things like, so if you can negotiate some sick days in there. There's full-time versus part-time. At my company, there's one developer who works 4 days a week. At my last job, I worked 4 days a week as well. It's great. Can't recommend it enough.
That's 10-hour days.
No, I was just doing 8-hour days. I just was being paid like 80% of what I normally would be paid, and just had long weekends, and it was amazing. I really miss it. But if you can do stuff like that, that's great. Also, if you're working for a foreign company, you might want to negotiate ahead of time which holidays will you take. Say, in my case, there's I think one more Canadian holiday a year than American holidays. Take the Canadian months because of the August long weekend. So.
You can also negotiate what currency you're paying.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually had a conversation with Mark, and he said he definitely take it in Canadian dollars rather than U.S. Which is nice, so I don't have those month-to-month fluctuations in what ends up in my bank account. But yeah, I mean, if you like to take risks, then that's definitely.
And you could always take it in American dollars and hedge it against Canadian and make a little money there in the exchange rates.
Yeah.
So at what point would you engage in these negotiations? I've been told in the past that once you get the offer, you know it's solid and they want you, that's when it's time to negotiate these types of things.
Yeah, when you hear the magic words, we want to hire you.
You don't want to negotiate before them because you haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
They may be offering more than you just were about to negotiate. So get them to give it to you, and then you go from there.
So all this you're talking about is definitely happening. You've seen.
Yeah, because, I mean, the good part about that, once you've gotten like a verbal offer or they've told you that they're interested in you, that they won't be scared away by you, making demands or wanting to work with the offer a little bit. But there's no point if they're already thinking about 3 other people and you start getting all needy. That probably won't play out so well. So some of the things here, we've got medical, dental, vision. If you've got kids and need braces, some plans have preventative measures like, you can go for a massage. There's also long and short-term disability, which is actually quite handy to have, which will probably be, some set number of weeks at some percentage of your pay. You can have life insurance bundled in as well. So it might be, a certain amount of times what your annual salary is. So when your salary goes up, your life insurance will as well. And then, you've got spousal coverage and things like that. So not all of these plans are created equal. And so sometimes these are negotiable. Like, say, sometimes, like in my case, I'm actually, because I'm the only Canadian employee at my company, I'm the only one who uses this particular company for benefits because it's like Great West Life or whatever. And so they do have different packages. And so when you negotiate your job, you can say, this is the package that I want. These are the sorts of the things that I need. Okay, so this gets to what we were talking about before. Here's the question. We're starting to negotiate. So what's your current salary? What's
I don't even answer that. When they ask me my current salary, I tell them what I'm looking for.
Exactly.
That's how I answer that question. And I give a range of what I'm looking for. For a minimum of this, but I actually don't say that.
Okay, so these are different approaches. You can just blurt it out, which some people do. You can give a range, or you can say, what's your third option? Yeah, I'm not comfortable discussing this right now.
Price.
So yeah, market price. I want something competitive, right? Like, so this is the thing. Like, you're not under any obligation to discuss your salary. So this is the mind your own business option. Where basically you're arguing that they should pay you what the market will bear. And the second argument here is that what I make right now is not relevant. It doesn't really define my value to you as an employer. What it may actually be a greater indicator of is how terrible I was at negotiating my salary when I initially got the job I now have. So if you walk into this job, you're desperate or whatever, you make a huge mistake and you take a lower salary, don't let that haunt you when it comes time to get the next job, because your employer might say, oh, this is what you're making, I'll offer you another 10 or 15%. That should be good enough, right? It's hard to say, no, I want double what I'm making now. I mean, you can make those arguments, but it's a tougher row to hoe, right? So, but you might also just say, you know what, sure, no problem. Maybe you're already making way more money than a lot of other people in your field. Maybe, in fact, you're worried that this company doesn't have the budget to accommodate you. So in that case, it's maybe not a problem where you say, look, this is how much I make now. You need to beat this. And if this is the case, when we talked about this too, like say if you get contacted by a recruiter, that's where you can really say, you know what, like you really need to tell me up front what kind of money we're talking about so we don't waste anybody's time here. Okay, so they might phrase it as, what are your salary requirements? And again, so is this a question you should answer? Well, that depends. So, and we did talk about this information being power. And again, just try and use this to your advantage as much as you can. Is this actually a fight? I would say you should consider it a game, a little bit like a chess match. It's definitely adversarial, but you are dealing with another human being. You don't want to come off like some kind of a jerk. Is you trying to get the upper hand in the power play or whatever. But you really should. You got to stand your ground, and they'll respect you for it. Don't be a pushover when it comes to these things. But you don't want to bargain in bad faith. I mean, you say the other option would be when they ask about your salary, you could just lie. You could tell them your fantasy salary, and that's what you're making right now. It may or may not work for you. Could come back to haunt you at some point. And that's not what I would call bargaining in good faith.
John, if there's any evidence of it, then you can subsequently get the situation that, oh, you lied when you applied, right?
Yeah,
it's true, but it's hard to find out from some salary.
Yeah, it is. I would say probably better off just not talking numbers, and because you may actually get more money if you don't blurt out your salary. So here's my advice. And again, this is just kind of what I think. I really love it when a job advertises a salary range. That makes me much more interested in it to start with, because I feel like they're being upfront with me, and we don't have to do a lot of this dance. So just try to do your best to avoid it, stating any numbers in the general case. Again, if you're not prepared to talk about it, say you're not prepared to talk about it. I had a recruiter once before an interview say, so let's talk about money, and I just honestly said, I don't feel comfortable about this right now. Like, I was just about to walk into the interview. Like, it just didn't seem relevant, and also I didn't feel like I was going to come out of this in a good way. So now, what you can try to do is get the employer to give you a ballpark range of what the other developers are getting. I did have a discussion with a recruiter once, and she did give me a number about what everyone else was making. I said, okay, I would like something in that range or whatever, and then I got a recall from like her boss a few minutes later saying, why asking for all this money? But she was new, and I guess maybe gave me information she wasn't supposed to. But that worked out for me. That's fine. So if you ask them for a range, you're not singling out. You're not saying, look, what's Dave making? What are you paying your team leads? What are you making? Those kinds of things. And it is not unreasonable for you to ask. And one thing you can say is like, look, I've been doing this for a while, and I expect to be paid competitively. And I've said this before in like interviews, and it just said, look, I don't want to show up here and find out I'm making way less money than everybody else. So I want to make sure that like whatever this offer is, that it definitely is competitive. So if you put that on the table, I don't think anybody would be offended by that. Now, if your employer is the first to give you a number because you really just refuse to do it, you have an advantage because their initial offer to you might actually be higher because you don't know what the range is, right? You may have undercut yourself by $20,000 easily, and if you're negotiating, if the company says we're going to offer you $100,000 or whatever, then that's great. Now you have a basis to work from. You work up from there because they gave you the number, and that's whatever it is. You can argue from the basis that that's not really what you had in mind. You had a little bit more in mind now that you have that number.
I'm not saying somewhere around the median for this position. Median.
I wouldn't say medium. Say competitive.
Yeah, say competitive. You want something that's in the upper range.
Yeah, you want to be in the upper range, which usually is competitive. You don't want to be actually right in the middle.
It's better to look at it as not what's your value as opposed to what is the value of your work to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I prefer to leave a few percent on the table so that they're constantly irritating.
Well, I was watching that sort of video about this, and they were talking about the fact that there is sort of the outside chance that you demand so much money and they give it to you that once you get there, they've got these huge expectations of you, and it might be hard for you to fulfill your role. I would call that, in Toronto, we would call that the Brian McCabe rule. But essentially, you don't want to set yourself up for failure by demanding too much money. I think that's rarely going to be the problem, unless you come off like some kind of superstar. I think the thing is, like, I would say probably everybody in this room is a senior-ish person. You should get senior pay, right? You don't
like it goes back to like when you're researching positions. Even before you're looking at a job, you should be researching salary range, right? You should basically know what you want, and you're not going to ask for vastly more than what is average for the job you're applying for. So it is a rare case that you're going to ask for too much. And if what you ask for really is too much, they probably aren't going to hire us.
Yeah, or they'll let you know. I mean, they'll just say, look, we can't do that, but we can do this. So so the danger of you saying actually what you want means you may actually ask for less than they were willing to offer. I have a small company, and I've got this kid, and he does web development work for me. He lives with his mom or something, but he actually does really good work. But when I asked him, he was quoting like $20 an hour, something ridiculous, right? And somebody else is going to charge me 60 or more. But when he quotes me the 20, I pay him the 20 because that's what he quoted me, right? I don't say, oh, Steve, you should be charging 50, whatever, right? Because I'm thinking, well, why am I giving all this money away, right? But basically, if he asked me to pay more, I would have no problems paying because he does good work, and that's sort of the thing you need to keep in mind when you're in these negotiations is they're willing to pay money. They want a job well done, and they're willing to pay well for it. I mean, the advantage that we have in this industry is that there's more of a demand for good developers than there are good developers, right? I mean, that could change in 10 years or whatever. But right now, we're sort of in a good position in this industry, so you should definitely take advantage of that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about a recruiter wanting you to give a rate just before you're going.
Yeah.
So you try not to tell the recruiters what you want.
Do you mean was it a recruiter for the company?
It was an internal,
okay, so
internal like recruiter.
Not head hall. Not, it was a guy on the other side, not your side.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was just prepping me for the interview, and then he wants to talk money at the same time. But it was like this thing I'd flown out to like New York, and it's just there overnight kind of thing. But I actually ended up leaving that negotiation. I actually did it via chat when I got home, and that actually ended up working out really well. The other thing is if you're interviewing at two companies, and let's say you manage to get the offer that you want from one company, it's totally ethical to go to another company and say, look, I'm looking into this is what the other company's offering me. Did you want to match it? I've done that too, and it works well. So.
Don't ever bluff that.
No, you would. No, exactly.
Well,
and that
don't bluff it unless you're willing not to take the job.
Yeah.
Unless you're willing to.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to sort of like doing this ethically, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying, look, these are two things I'm interested in. This is what's on the table here. What do you think? Because if you can't match it, I'd be passing that up to work here. So again, you may be asked to justify your salary. It's probably not an unreasonable request. So it should be based again on this research. Take your skills and experience into account. And then you could also make the argument about how much value you're bringing to the company. I mean, essentially, if you look at it in the terms of the company, they're paying you X amount of dollars. They expect the work that you do to have a return that's somewhat greater than X, right? If you've been there for a while and they feel like you're delivering something less than that, then they have a problem. If you sort of deliver consistently right around what they're paying you, then you're sort of like a net neutral effect on the company's income. They may work with you to do better, but basically if you can prove that paying me $80,000 is going to bring you $150,000 over the next year, it's it should be brain dead.
But also be aware of just how variable salaries are. I managed a team like 10 people, and it was amazing the range of salaries versus what their experience and some it's just historical. They work a high-paying job, they managed to carry that over. Some people are particularly aggressive, but when people ask you to justify your salary, you have to know that actually there's not a real correlation between the salary and skills and experience. And the only place that's really struck me as interesting, the place where they said the salary is my job. Everyone who does X gets paid Y. So if you have this title, apply for that job, this is what you're going to get, and there is no negotiation around the salary.
Yeah, exactly, and there are still the other negotiables. Might be human factors. If you have a lot of kids, if you have high housing costs. I mean, you could say, look, I have fixed costs. Those aren't going to go away regardless of where I work. So I need to make this up in my salary. You can accommodate me or not, but that will be part of the negotiation. So those are things that you have to account for. So as Mike was talking about the lateral moves, I would say to beware of it because when you're changing jobs, that is actually a really good time for you to negotiate a raise for yourself. It's hard to get a significant raise at the place you already are in a lot of cases. Much, much easier when you're going to some place that's looking for new people. And you can make that quite clear again with saying, basically I'm happy at my current workplace, I'm looking for new stuff, but right now a lateral move doesn't make sense for me. Why would I pick up and leave just to do a similar thing somewhere else for the same amount of money? It doesn't really make sense. And then again, if some things aren't negotiable now, you could ask if they could be revisited in the future. I've done that too. Say, well, look, I'm not really happy with vacation days. Can we talk about that sometime in the future? I'd say, yeah. Okay, do you want to take a lower salary to start with? Are you desperate for this job? I would say don't do it. Absolutely don't do it unless, you're about to lose your home or you're going to end up homeless, like on the street, this kind of thing. Because it's, again, that problem where you can negotiate down quite easy, but you can't negotiate up. I know somebody who was hired, he took a lower salary at a company thinking, well, I just want to get my foot in the door and then, hopefully we could work out from there. But then in order to bring this person in line with everyone else, it would have been something like a 40% raise. And when he asked for it, they're like, what do you care? Are you crazy? We're going to never give anyone that kind of a raise. Why are we going to give it to you? So they didn't recognize the fact that he probably was doing at least as much work as everyone else and being paid 40% less. And they just really weren't willing to remedy that. So he ended up leaving. Now, you could find yourself in a situation where salary is not a negotiable. So I was reading about Fog Creek software. I don't know if it's still true, but at some point they just basically had, they'll do a calculation of, what your skill set is, how long you've been working, and then they'll put you into like some kind of salary grade, and everyone on that grade gets the same amount of money. No arguments. You might be applying for a union job. I remember I applied for a job at U of T once, and it was, they just said, this is the money, this is it. Yeah, you're like an R3 or something. What's that?
I said if it's a union job, you don't want it.
Well, there are different opinions on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the union before. It's not always that bad, but I mean, those are definitely things to be aware of. Now, is the first offer the final offer? No, probably not. I mean, with anything, you're always going to leave yourself some wiggle room, and the employer's doing the same thing. They're not going to say on the first offer they make to you is not going to be absolutely the maximum amount of money that they could possibly pay you. If you're dealing, say, with an internal HR person, what they might take a tactic that says, oh, well, I know I can get you this much without having somebody sign off on it. And then you might be able to push them and say, okay, well, I need to get the VP or somebody to sign off on that. So it may take a little more time, but they'll definitely have a range that they can offer you right out of the gate, and then you can work for something like from that point on. So I know one of the first jobs I took, they called me and they said, oh, we want you to work here, here's the money, and I was like, great. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. And he's like, you guys sound puzzled. He's like, so are you saying you're going to take this job? I'm like, yeah. And then I hung up. And then like years later, I'm like, what was I doing? Like, it sounded like he was actually like giving me an in, like to say, no, like, you sure you can't do a little bit better? But I was like, it's just great. I was just happy to be employed. And, I don't know how much I could have gotten, but the thing is, you don't know until you ask. So you really just need to ask.
You can even say, that's great, thanks for the offer. Let me think about it.
Exactly.
Probably you should always say that. You shouldn't negotiate right away, right on the spot, ever. You should always say, like, I need to think about it.
It's always a good idea, because you don't want to seem too eager.
Yeah.
Even if you're like,
yes. Yeah. Give yourself time to calm down.
Consider it, and at least it gives you a chance to, if you just go back and say, yeah, I accept, then you jump in.
Yeah. These are things that you learn with experience or with
when other people tell you.
Hearing a talk about somebody who's made those mistakes, right? So now I'll share these links on the list later, but this first blog post was something that really, really changed my way of thinking around salary negotiations. And the video is like a really helpful role play between two people about how to actually do the negotiation itself. So. So there's this website called IWillTeachYouToBeRich.com, and it's a horrible name, and there's really a lot of stuff that's around trying to get you to buy courses and things like that. But there's actually a lot of good free content on this site, and a lot of it around negotiating things. And so I would say if you have a look at the blog, you might actually find some stuff there. I did actually buy his book for like $10 on Amazon. I had actually like these great hits like call up your credit card company and just ask for a lower rate on your card. I'm like, I'll do it. And it works. So depending on who you're with, it's like, oh, you mean this 18% card could have been 12% all along, and I just didn't know it. Like, so that's sort of outside of the spec here, but basically, he does talk a lot about psychology and just negotiating with people and trying to get just a little more out of them. So Open source. If you don't have any open source experience, get some, especially for these sorts of developer jobs. When I see a resume with a lot of open source on it, like that, just to me automatically sort of rises towards the top of the pile, unless it's like terrible open source work that you published. But usually, you know, it gives me an indicator of the quality of your work, especially if you've worked on a project that I'm familiar with. I know it's not easy to get code into master on this project, or I know that you've gone through code reviews, you know how to write tests, like all these kinds of things. It tells me a lot about you if you do some open source. If you don't do any, then just do some. Like just publish something like, you know, a module that you think is interesting, or just join a project. Like I work on MetaCPAN. I can tell you there are right now hundreds of issues of bugs and feature requests that are waiting to be implemented. Alex did actually a bigger feature request for us that was really great, and
Yeah, it wasn't used.
no, it actually is in use. So yeah, it's merged to master, and I actually saw there's actually a pull request in for like a fix related to it right now. Not a fix for your code, but just to get the cron working. But anyway, so it's definitely being used. You should build your network. So, you know, I think we talked about this too. Like, it's just easier to get into a place if you already know somebody there, somebody that can vouch for you. So just get out and get to know people. A good place to do this is, you know, through open source, and also just going to conferences and getting out and speaking to people. It's a little bit hard, maybe sometimes at your first conference, to go up and just talk to someone, but that's what people are there for. Like, whether they admit it or not, they're there to meet other people. So at some point I decided, you know what, I'm not going to be shy anymore at conferences, and now I see people just walk up and talk to them. I've never had a bad experience with it.
It's really easy to talk to someone when you just kind of talk together. You know, if it's a good talk, that was obviously a good talk, and people were interested. It's easy to, like, you'll see people talking together, you just go over and join the conversation. It's very easy.
Yeah.
No, community doesn't seem to be particularly friendly. I don't know if it's Larry's influence.
Trickle down.
With some exceptions.
Yeah. But I mean, at conferences I haven't been treated rudely, or, you know, I'm just like, but as Mark was saying too, it's a good, like, you can just ask people what interesting talks they've been to, or what are they planning on seeing, and then right away you have a sort of a talking point to move you along. Now, LinkedIn is probably the standard way right now of sort of building your business network, and you don't have to put a ton of work into it, but just try to keep it reasonably up to date. I actually recently just did a little bit of extra work, like fleshed out my profile now, so that I got like this, all these recruiters start getting in contact with me.
What I'll say is make your profile look like a resume. That's what it should do. Like, things you would put in your resume, and as you want them to look on a resume, make your profile look like that. And when they read it, even if they don't realize it's your resume, it's they're reading it like that, and it actually helps a lot. Because your resume is already written in a way that you're trying to promote yourself. So if you write your profile that way, it helps a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, keeping my profile up to date has been handy. I got contact there with my Google, their contact with my Facebook.
Nice.
And I was a Rockstar, because they had some combination of skills that they're interested in.
I think also it might tell recruiters how recently it's been updated.
Yeah, probably.
Well. So like if you just update it frequently with something, anything, it just shows it's a recent profile.
Yeah. I find too, when people recommend you for skills and you sort of accept it, like somebody recommended me for Ruby on Rails, and as a joke I accepted it, but I don't do any Rails work. But then, like, I'm starting to get contacted about Rails jobs and things like that, so that could be a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, and I think some people just kind of, stuff comes up and they go, yeah, sure, he knows about that.
Yeah.
You know, somebody I
get that
met
all the time.
15 years ago recommended me for some skill, and I thought,
I get these recommendations from people that couldn't possibly, like,
yeah.
I know them even now, but they have no idea about this skill. Like, they're like, you know,
Yeah.
they're not in coding, they're not in programming, they wouldn't have the remotest clue if I was good at this.
Although I did some, so I was getting at LinkedIn is now, it's an algorithm running where people who are on your contact list,
Yeah, they just bubble up.
it'll actually push suggestions of saying,
Yeah.
based on this person's profile and the groups they belong to, and everything, they might have this skill, do they?
Yeah.
And so that's part of where you
And I think that's where it's coming from,
Yeah.
but it's really annoying. Because you can't stop those from happening when people, you know, like,
can't
give you a
do-
+1 for, you know, HTML coding, and they're a baker. You know, it's like, well, yeah, maybe they know I'm a good HTML developer, but it's doubtful.
You can remove stuff like that if someone puts something on that's just not very capable.
Yeah.
The other bit about that is to curate your profile heavily. If you're getting a lot of skills endorsements, remove things that are not relevant.
Mhm.
Don't keep them there. It just looks like you're open to anything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point, and I think that you'll probably get a lot less of the recruiters targeting you that are like not doing anything related to what you want to do. So aside from that, just try and be nice to people. It's sort of obvious, I would think, but there's so many jerks out there. Like, I mean, not by and large, people are nice, but don't be a jerk on IRC, which is people seem to find really easy to do. Don't be a jerk on Reddit or Hacker News or blogs.pearl, because people do remember you. And I've been in conversations where you get an applicant and somebody says, you know what, I don't want to hire this person. I've seen how they treat people on IRC. And that was literally how it was. And, I've had somebody say, you know what, I would rather quit than work with this person. Never met that person, but they're basically throwing down the gauntlet. If you want to pursue this, I am out of here. So that's definitely something you have to think about. People, you kind of think you get a free pass on IRC to be rude to people, but that's not really. I mean, you work with other humans, and you don't know if the person you've just been rude to is the hiring manager at the next place you're about to send an application to.
Pearl world is not a huge world, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, there's recruiters too. People seem to think recruiters are the scum of the earth. I think the problem essentially with recruiters is that we regard them as salespeople, and they don't generally know too much about what they're hiring for, right? And it can be this sort of a frustrating experience. But I think of it this way: there's this person who exists solely to find me my next job. I mean, exactly. They're out there. They're already combing through these jobs and trying to find something for somebody like me. Why would this anger me?
And they're getting paid specifically if you get hired. So they don't get paid if you don't get placed. So.
I don't mind talking to them. I will not add them to my network, because then what happens if somebody says, oh, so-and-so, which is a recruiter. And to me, that feels kind of like a stupid answer.
I don't mind that.
I don't mind that. I had somebody actually say it to me the other day. They said, "Oh, I saw a bunch of recruiters come up that you added on LinkedIn." And I said, "Well, I actually add recruiters all the time. This is what I do because I'm trying to build up my network." And one of the reasons I add recruiters is because if I get asked for a job and I don't know, it's not a job I'm interested in, then I just refer somebody that I do know that's interested in the job. That helps out the recruiter. Could potentially get a job for a friend or a colleague. And in one case, I actually had a recruiter send me a check for $250 after the signing actually worked out. So it's this sort of it kind of feeds itself. If I feed a job to a recruiter and it works out, he might come back to me, or she even for the next job, and at one point you may be interested. I just really think that the worst possible time to look for a job is when you need a job, right? So this is just all part of just being aware, you don't know. When the small startup you belong to is going to be sold to a bigger corporation and the culture is going to totally change. You don't know when somebody's going to decide that they want to spend less on, development and whatever. There's a lot of factors that are outside of your control, right? Regardless of the size of the company. So it's just good. To me, it's just being prepared. You're kind of selling yourself short if you don't have a plan B. You should always have a plan B.
There's no such thing as a permanent job.
Yeah.
And one thing about the recruiters is that if you start adding them, if you're in a job where you're unhappy and you start contacting recruiters and adding them, that's a red flag that may get you invited in for an uncomfortable discussion.
So I would counter that with making it a habit to do it all the time.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Because there are differences in quality. So
really is.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You keep the good ones and you start rejecting the bad ones, but you build up enough solid people who know exactly what you're looking for.
There's the Talent Now Connect tribe who persist in posting to Pearl jobs which are not Pearl or which are allegedly related to Toronto and in fact are in Georgia, as happened currently.
Yeah.
Talent Now, in particular, they have a cliche headline. I'm hiring, awesome culture, check this out.
Right.
Hiring is what you do. Who cares about the culture? And would you please tell me what and where, so I don't have to waste time going to the site. So I flag all of those as inappropriate now. Just
Okay. Well, I mean, I think if you care about social fit, you do care about culture.
I definitely care.
I mean, you don't care maybe so much about a pinball machine or something
It's
like
not,
that.
it's
but-
not like that's the top of my list, but it is definitely on there, because if it's a bad culture, I don't want to work there, and I'm not going to stay there.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, there's a place like this, Casal Media.
Yeah.
I had there was there
Did Matt used to work there?
the working condition appears to be a sweatshop. It's a huge barn, and everybody's got about that much bench space and nowhere to put their stuff. And it's in a building that's about 20 feet high, so I imagine it must sound like a traffic jam.
Yeah.
And they're rude as well.
Yeah, I don't have too much experience with them, but yeah, like just basically like if you keep your ear to the ground, then you're just going to be better prepared for when you do need the job. And also, I think you'll have a little bit less research to do about what market rates are when you see, just sort of monitor jobs.pro and things like
I
that.
would actually recommend, when you just recruiters come after you now and then, do job interviews now and then. Whether you're thinking about taking the job or not,
exactly.
You're not interested at all, who cares? You take the job, you get practice doing job interviews, you practice the whiteboarding, and you never know, you might actually just love it and want to take it anyway. So like, you should never really turn down those things when they come along. It's just, there's no downside to like doing it essentially.
Yeah, there's again like a corollary for musicians that say like with classical musicians, like if an auditioning musician is a good musician because you're always trying to keep your skills up to par so that you can do the next interview. And the thing is like your company, wherever you go for your next job, they might be hiring 5 or 6 people before they decide on you. There's no reason you can't interview at 5 or 6 other companies before you decide on where you want to work. And again, this goes to the whiteboarding being a skill, but interviewing really is a skill as well. So don't just let that skill lie for years at a time. Like go out and do interviews, and you'll learn more about other companies. You'll know what you're missing, and frankly, you may actually appreciate your own job more after going to interview at other places and seeing what they're like. So, like I think there's definitely 2 sides to the coin. It's good to be informed, especially the way things are now. Like I don't think. Yeah, there are really no lifetime jobs. This isn't it's not a marriage, a lifetime commitment, or something like that, right? So. I mean, you just need to be prepared that there will be a change of employment at some point, whether that is your choice or not. It's not something you can easily tell at this point. But definitely, like that's something I probably should have included. But like, just do interviews, just do them. Like
purely for practice, it shouldn't be even a question. Just go and see what people have to say.
And you can't do them all the time because you always have to take time off work for them and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And, you don't want to do that. But, periodically just do it a few times a year, even if you're not looking for a job.
People are open to doing interviews even at the oddest hours.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
They're interested.
You can always negotiate.
there's that true, and there's the other point of it is like if a place really likes you and you're not prepared to take that job now, maybe in 6 months or 12 months, if your situation changes, you could go back to that company and say, are you still hiring? Some companies are always hiring. So. It's really not a bad thing to just try and keep your options open. Right?
That's a good point. If you're not prepared to take the job for whatever reason, make sure you leave on a good note with them. Like, you're very polite about it, say it's just not going to work out right now or whatever, and even mention it. Maybe in the future I'll talk to you.
Yeah, for instance, even if they're not doing a signing bonus and you're getting your bonus in on 6 months from now, you can say, look, I'm not. Maybe talk to me in 6 months or whatever, right? Like there's all these sort of varying factors that get played in. And I mean, it takes a long time to hire a good person, and they might be amenable to just waiting a little bit longer, especially if you're doing an overseas move. Some of these people aren't expecting you, and before 3 months are up anyway. In some of these cases.
So with the recruiter, though, I find that there's an expectation that you are in the market for a job.
Oh yeah, they have that expectation, but you don't have to.
That's right.
But I mean, it's a little more of a balancing act.
Yeah,
Sure.
But what I'll say is just keep an open mind. Like even if you're not really looking for a job, go into it with an open mind.
Yeah,
you might find you really love it.
You can tell the recruiter that too. Just say, look, I love my job. I'm going to be open-minded about it, and I'll go do this interview. If it doesn't work out, I'm not going to take it, right? You're not going to take it just to put money in the recruiter's pocket.
Yeah,
but
you should say that anyways. Even if you're desperate for a job, you should be telling the recruiter that.
Yeah.
I'm not desperate to leave, because they will start giving you lower positions that you don't really want to take anyways. So, you should, you're selling yourself the whole time, right? So even with a recruiter, you're selling yourself to them so that they can sell you to.
Especially with
Yeah, and the thing with the recruiter is they're essentially just trying to build more leads as well. So if they're just trying to earn money. So if you can then refer a colleague of yours who maybe does want to make a move and they get the job, then the recruiter's happy either way. And also, actually, if you know of a company that's looking for a recruiter, you refer that person recruiter. There's more than one way to keep a recruiter happy and on side rather than just taking the job, right? That's essentially my slides right there. I don't know if there's anything anybody else wanted to go over. Did people find this helpful? Was there anything in particular that you found helpful about this? Like any?
Negotiation side is interesting. A lot of points in there that I missed. Exploration. Your points are quite. No, just to share the slide, please.
Okay.
Your points are quite worded, something really good.
Okay.
That's something that I've always had a problem with.
Most people do. Certainly in the beginning, we were talking about.
Yeah.
Shut off your alerts like you do that so that you can do something that you did so you have recruiter.
Right.
Like I have my shut off because I don't want people because every time you do something it keeps it's kind of embarrassing.
I keep mine off unless there's something I want to be shared, and then I'll turn it on, then update. So I control basically what it takes some effort, but it's good.
Never thought of that.
Great, thanks. I was this sort of a talk I've been thinking of giving for a while, and I thought it's something I could give like to groups that aren't specifically pro-centric and things like that. So I just wanted to test drive it here. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that. Field that. Anyone have any thoughts?
Sorry, what was the question?
Who you would add on LinkedIn versus who you wouldn't add?
So what I do is like anyone that I would be happy to work with, I'll add them, and people that I would not want to work with again, I don't add.
So even if you're not worried about consulting, if they ask you to add the strangers, no, like if you work with someone and they ask you, they really like working.
That's a good question.
It hasn't bothered me before. Hasn't bothered me before.
Well, the question is whether they're going to reflect badly on you. It's up to jerks.
I mean, maybe if I didn't want to work with them, I wouldn't add them. Maybe they come and put me on the spot, and say, "Why didn't you add me on LinkedIn?" Maybe I would cave at that point, but it's unlikely I was ever going to do that.
You can always cut them later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that happens.
I tend to ask people and then it starts becoming like
And odds are pretty good that if someone wants to add you, it's not that they may have liked working with you, but they may not have liked working with them. Because I can't imagine people are Machiavellian enough that they want to add people that they didn't like to do something. I don't know.
Well, no, some people do it. You just add everyone you've ever met, so that you have a bigger network, so there's more chance to be heard about stuff. Like that's one way to use LinkedIn too. Right? You're not there for friends or anything. You're just there to have as big a network as humanly possible, so that hopefully someone that's in their network sees you and your network sees you because you're attached to them, and then they can, you might get a job out of it. So like that's another way to look at it too.
There's one thing I find in some of the advice on job seeking is about telling companies in advance what you think you're going to be able to do for them. One of the things I found consistently is that even when people say explicitly what their problems are, don't take that at face value. Dig and find out what they really are. How can I come up with something to benefit you in advance when you don't even know what your problems are?
Honestly, it's a bad question for an employee to ask you, like, what can you do for us? It's like, I've never worked here before. I've never seen your code. I've never seen your culture in depth. There's no way I can really answer that. All you can do is, you do the general things like, I'm a hard worker, I'm willing to learn, I like researching. You just say the general things that everyone should be saying in an interview. And like, you can't tell them any specific thing you're going to be able to help them with. Probably.
Even the achievements that it may be fairly straightforward for a salesperson or something, those the numbers that you make. But over time, I've consistently tried to find out from the people I've been working for what value I might be providing. And they don't know. So how am I supposed to tell?
That's common too. It's hard to quantify what you're doing.
I mean,
Unless you're
unless
you're the sole developer on a project and the project makes X amount of money, then they can say, well, I can definitely see it. But even if there's two people on the project, you still don't know how much each one contributed. There's no way to tell that. Maybe one of them, maybe they even did 50% of the code, but one part of the code made more money. There's no way to tell that. So it's really hard for them to tell.
And there's a peculiar contradiction now. The job specifications are a laundry list of things, which usually add up to slightly more than anybody who works at the company would actually know. But since I started studying, the classifications have been becoming finer and finer. That things that, to me, I've done projects literally from feasibility study. Can we get this much information in this machine through to training the user? Just as a contractor. Now I see things where there are tester jobs at something where the analyst would have designed the system, the programmer would have done it, and maybe somebody would have tested it. Now I've got 15 people in that chain, and yet I can't claim the uniquely having done anything. So I and probably a lot of other people don't fit the cliches which the recruiters are trying to match.
It's usually easy to get into a conversation with the hiring manager, especially if they're looking to see what you do for them. If you can set the stage and say, okay, well, what would you expect me to accomplish in the first 3 months, next 6 months? So you can kind of start setting your milestones, so you can gauge whether or not it's actually possible for you to achieve it. And then based on that, you can figure out, get an idea of where they're going with this.
All of this is predicated on getting close enough to have that conversation, which is good. Having been fired by my pimp for being too old, literally said you should consider yourself. It's what I know how to do.
One thing that I do find that to be useful is expressing your knowledge in the underlying concepts, as opposed to, like in DevOps, you're throwing Puppet and Chef and Ansible and all these things, and everybody's up in arms about how awesome this stuff is. Very few people realize that at the lowest levels, it's all really the same stuff that's happening. And understanding and explaining that gets you.
I mean, some of it is people suddenly seem to have come up with new classifications for what is part of an existing job. Even the DevOps stuff, as far as I can tell, it appears to be about promoting the code so that it actually gets executed, which sort of seems to me the whole point of the exercise. So,
yeah, there's
what's all the big mystery?
I think there's probably a lot of different ideas on what DevOps is to different people, and I think the industry itself is still trying to figure that out.
They keep coming up with different names for the same thing.
I think you just have to roll with that. I think you were talking about buzzwords and stuff before. Just because that's, I think you have to make some effort to try and relate to whoever it is that is on the other end. And sometimes they package that in ways you might think are nonsensical or whatever, but I think you have to try and to even find out if it's what it is, right? Kind of have to.
Some of the stuff like data architect, which is, as far as I can tell, is a tiny little bit of what would have been the systems analyst job.
Yeah, I guess it means different things in different contexts, right? even the same job title can sometimes be.
Job description is more important
Yeah.
than it's taking somewhere.
Yeah, it's assuming the job description is correct. Right?
And
Thanks, guys.
for the time to the salary negotiation, is it very common that you walk in and people, I mean, you at the end of the interview, say they will tell you right away, hey, you are really good, I'm going to hire you. Is it very common for that, or?
Usually.
I'm actually really scared when that happens.
Normally they say you go back and wait for an answer, and
Yeah.
then several days later maybe you get an email saying we're going to hire you and this is the money we're going to pay you. But then we are going to negotiate just the salary with.
If you
No,
put
it's
it
right.
right,
If they tell you how much they're going to pay you, you say like, hey, thank you for the offer, and thank you for the salary offer, and I'm actually looking to make this much. And you say more than that. That's when you negotiate. You actually say that just because they gave you an offer for a certain amount, you don't have to accept it. Yeah.
So just run right back to whatever to whoever wrote me that letter.
Yeah. That's who you're negotiating with. Whoever sent you the offer.
Well, I think if you've gone through an agency, then you can sort of put it back and say, well, I'd rather let my agent negotiate that.
Yeah.
So I don't have to talk about
Usually, if you go through an agency or recruiter, they're going to send the offer to the recruiter,
Yeah.
who will then send it to you. They don't. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes they like to do it themselves, but usually that'll happen.
The PIP's in a better position to know what prices than you are, because they said that they deal with that on a regular basis.
We should probably shut it down.
Yeah, let's shut it down, yes. You should click on stop broadcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say thanks.
Almost 2 years later.
So guys, before everyone goes,